Diddy, one of the most powerful figures in music, crumbled in front of the entire courtroom after learning his $50 million bail package was denied. The mogul, used to mansions and private jets, now faces life in a tiny jail cell, and the shock was too much to bear. Diddy's bail package, a desperate plea, denied. So here's the scoop. The Diddy tried to pull out all the stops to avoid staying in jail. After his arrest, he offered a bail package that would make anyone's head spin, a whopping $50 million. Imagine that his lawyers came up with this massive deal, practically throwing every valuable asset Diddy had at the court to get him out, even if just for a little while. First off, he offered $50 million in bail, which is already a jaw-dropper, right? But it didn't stop there. Diddy was really going all in. He offered his $48 million Miami mansion, complete with all its luxuries, and even put up his private jet, the same jet he's probably taken for spontaneous trips around the world. As if that wasn't enough, he also got his family involved. Diddy's mom and other family members co-signed on the bail package, showing they were equally invested in getting him out of this mess. On top of all that, Diddy promised to surrender his passport, so no flying off to some tropical island, and even agreed to home detention. He was basically saying, look, I'll stay home, just don't make me stay in jail. But wait, there's more. His lawyer sweetened the deal even further by offering weekly illicit item tests to prove he's clean, a visitor log submitted every night to keep track of who's coming and going, and even restrictions on female visitors besides his mom, daughters, and their mothers. No other women could come see him. Diddy was ready to follow every rule thrown at him if it meant avoiding that cell. I mean, the guy was pulling out everything to stay out of jail. But despite all that, the judge took one look at this shiny bail package and said nope. Why? Well, here's where things start to get messy. The prosecution made a pretty convincing case that Diddy wasn't exactly the type of guy you could trust to stay out of trouble. They brought up some very concerning things from his past that painted a pretty ugly picture. One of the big things that came up was a series of old text messages from Diddy, and let me tell you, they were not the kind of texts you'd want anyone seeing in a courtroom. One of them, from 2016, was particularly bad. It was right after an incident where Diddy had been caught on camera his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura at a hotel. In the text, he was in full panic mode, practically begging for help. Call me, the cops are here, I got 6 kids, you please call, I'm surrounded, you're going to abandon me all alone. It showed how desperate and manipulative he could get when things were spiraling out of control. And that wasn't even the worst part. He allegedly paid the hotel $50,000 to erase the security footage of him throwing glass vases at Cassie during the whole altercation. That kind of power play, not a good look when you're trying to convince a judge that you won't interfere with evidence or witnesses. The judge also had to consider the fact that Diddy's immense wealth and influence gave him plenty of ways to make things disappear, whether it's evidence, witnesses, or anything else that could mess up his trial. Let's face it, someone with his kind of money can do a lot behind the scenes. The court worried that he'd use his resources to obstruct justice, maybe even try to in the people involved in the case. And let's not forget that Diddy isn't exactly new to controversies. He's been accused of everything from bribery to obstruction of justice in the past, so the fear that he tamper with witnesses this time around wasn't just a wild theory. In fact, when you look at other high-profile cases, Diddy's situation starts to make a little more sense. Take Harvey Weinstein, for example. Back in 2017, he was denied bail even though he was willing to put up millions too. Why? Because the court was worried about the same thing, obstruction of justice. And who could forget Jeffrey Epstein? He also offered an insane bail package, but the judge shut it down over fears he'd use his wealth to flee or tamper with witnesses. The courts have seen these kinds of cases before, and they weren't about to take any chances with Diddy. The collapse. Why? The music mogul couldn't handle the news. When Diddy heard the news in the courtroom, his $50 million bail offer rejected, and the realization that he wasn't going home, it was like watching someone hit a wall at full speed. Witnesses said he looked completely shaken, almost as if the weight of everything that had been hovering over him for weeks had finally crashed down all at once. Imagine the scene: a man who had spent decades living in the lap of luxury, always in control, suddenly reduced to someone barely able to keep it together. He wasn't just upset, he was absolutely devastated. Eyewitnesses in the courtroom described how Diddy's face changed as the judge delivered the verdict. His usual cool demeanor disappeared, replaced with an expression of disbelief. Some people said they could see him trembling, and it looked like he was about to pass out as the judge's words sank in. Did he actually collapsed? Whether it was from the shock, the stress, or pure emotional exhaustion, he couldn't handle it. Paramedics had to be called in, and it quickly became clear that the reality of his situation was hitting him hard, maybe harder than even he expected. This collapse wasn't just a physical reaction, it was the manifestation of something deeper. Diddy, who had spent his life surrounded by fame, fortune and the ultimate luxury, now had to face the brutal reality that his days of private jets and red carpets were over, at least for now. He was tearing down the prospect of a cold, cramped jail cell, and for someone who had never had to deal with any discomfort beyond a flight delay or a bad review, that must have been unbearable. The psychological toll of going from a $48 million mansion to a 6x 9-foot jail cell is hard to even imagine. How does someone who has lived in unimaginable luxury even begin to process that they'll be sleeping on a thin prison-issued mattress instead of silk sheets? For Diddy, this was probably the moment when everything became real. He's used to being in control of everything: his career, his image, even the people around him. But now he's faced with a situation where his money and influence can't save him. That's a blow to anyone's ego, but for someone like Diddy it's a complete nightmare. He's no longer the man calling the shots. Now he's at the mercy of a system he can't bribe or outsmart. No amount of charm, swagger, or even cash can make this problem go away, and that realization was probably terrifying. Let's not forget that Diddy has had his fair share of legal troubles before, but he's always managed to come out on top. In the past it was like he had a golden touch. Charges would come up, scandals would break, but he always managed to escape relatively unscathed. Take the infamous nightclub shooting in 1999 for example, when Diddy and his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez were arrested after a shooting left 3 people injured. Back then Diddy somehow walked away acquitted, while his protege Shine took the fall. Time and time again he's found a way to slip through the cracks of the justice system. But this time it feels different. This isn't just about getting into a fight at a nightclub or a minor scandal. These are charges that could put him away for life, and it's pretty clear that Diddy, for the first time in his life, realizes he might not be able to talk his way out of this one. That thought alone, that he could actually spend years, maybe decades in prison, must have contributed to his collapse in court. For someone used to living like a king, the idea of being locked up in one of the country's most notorious detention centers is beyond horrifying. As news of Diddy's breakdown spread, the reactions from those in the music industry were mix of shock and concern. Celebrities who once saw him as an untouchable mogul couldn't believe what they were hearing. The hip-hop community has always seen Diddy as larger than life, a man who had weathered scandals, legal battles and the highs and lows of the industry, always landing on his feet. But this time people weren't sure if he could come back from this. On social media there was an outpouring of support from some, while others were more skeptical, wondering if this was just the beginning of the end for Diddy. It's one thing to have your reputation tarnished by scandal, but for someone like Diddy, who has built his empire on being powerful, invincible and always in control, this collapse was more than just physical, it was symbolic. His world was crumbling right in front of him, and no amount of money or fame could fix it. Fears and Diddy's life in jail. High-profile inmates like Diddy face a unique kind of psychological strain when they land in jail. They've lived lives surrounded by luxury, yes, but also by constant attention and admiration. Diddy's every move has been followed, praised or criticized by the public for years, but he's always had his entourage, fans and money to buffer the blows. Now in jail all of that is stripped away. The isolation hits harder for people like him, because it's not just about being alone physically, it's about suddenly losing everything that made them who they were in the outside world. For Diddy, sitting alone in a cold cell with nothing but his thoughts must feel like the world is closing in, and that's why the authorities are taking no chances, keeping a close eye on him 247 to make sure he doesn't harm himself. It doesn't help that the Metropolitan Detention Center MDC, where Diddy is being held, is infamous for being one of the worst jails in the country. This place has a brutal reputation, and it's earned it. The conditions are downright awful, dirty, cramped and inhumane. Hygiene is practically non-existent, with inmates off 10 days without being able to pee.